Beginning woodworkers usually spend a lot of time determining what tools they need to get started, mytoollist.com, and learning how to use them. But I've heard from a lot of beginners that they are a little unprepared for their first trip to the lumber department of the blue or orange big box home centers. So in this video, I want to arm you with the confidence and knowledge to make the experience a little less overwhelming. I want to point out that this video is focused on those big box stores, since that's where most hobbyists shop. An actual lumber yard comes with its own set of intimidating stuff, and I'll save that for a future video. Before going to the home center, have a list of exactly what you need. Also, be prepared to make substitutions. They might be out of, say, 1x3 boards, so you might have to get 1x4s and rip them to size at home. It can be challenging, but try to get everything you need for a project in one trip. Be prepared to spend some time. Buying lumber isn't like running into the supermarket for a carton of milk. I like to buy about 10% more lumber than I need for a project. That leaves me with extra lumber for running tests and for any miscuts or mistakes I might make. Have a plan for bringing the lumber home. If you don't have a truck, you may need to get creative to get the wood into or on top of your car. Bring straps. If you have a battery-powered circular saw, bring it, and you can cut plywood down in the parking lot if you have to. Remember, you're on your own at big box home centers. Nobody is there to help you. When you get to the home center, there's going to be a big entrance on one side. That's the entrance and exit for lumber and building materials. Park on this side. The last thing you want to do is haul a stack of lumber all the way through the parking lot and end up down there with the gardening people. Also, give yourself some breathing room. Park down the aisle away from the other cars. It's just going to be a lot easier to load. So there's 4 different types of carts. The first is a regular old shopping cart. Don't even think about it. The second kind is a flatbed, and it's also not very useful for lumber. It's better for, say, bags of concrete or big boxes. Don't use it for wood. By the way, those carts work a lot better if you pull them rather than push them. This kind with the dividers will hold plywood and sheet goods on its edge, and you can stack boards on here also. I like to use these if I'm just buying boards, say a bunch of 2x4s, or if I'm getting a mix of plywood and boards. Loading sheet goods onto these slots can be a real pain in the ass, especially 3/4 inch plywood or MDF. But if you need to buy full sheets of plywood, especially if you need more than one, I personally prefer these. They are the easiest carts to load and unload, keeping the sheets horizontal the whole time. Keep in mind, if you're buying plywood, you're not going to be pushing it around the store shopping. Load it last and head straight for the checkout. For this reason, sheet goods are kept close to the entrance so that you can make a quick getaway. You might be a little overwhelmed by all the choices in the lumber department. The thing to keep in mind is that most of this material is not really for woodworking, but rather building and construction projects. As a woodworker, you're mostly going to look for finished grade plywood. This is plywood that's sanded on one or both faces. Your store might even have maple, oak, or other plywoods for making furniture. At this store, the prices are posted above the material, not below it. And always read those signs closely to see if they match up with the material. A lot of times people move sheets around and put them in the wrong bins, and you might think that the thing you're buying is a different price than it actually is. Which brings me to a little bit of lumber etiquette. As you move things around to find your best pieces, make sure you put everything back where it belongs. It sure makes it a lot easier for the next shopper. But don't think that you have to feel rushed or that you have to grab the first sheet that's on top either. You're paying a lot of money for this material, and you want your projects to look great. Examine the boards for chipped edges, splits, scratches, and other defects. Don't be rushed. Take the time to select the best pieces you can find. It goes without saying, but if you can, bring a helper with you. Moving plywood around is not easy. If you don't need a full sheet of plywood, or you just can't haul it, check out these smaller project panels. Of course, they cost more, but I use these a lot when I just don't want the hassle of dealing with a full 4x8 8-foot sheet of plywood. The only other thing you might possibly buy in the construction lumber section are 2x4s. 2x4 boards are framing lumber, but are often used in building shop projects, shelves, and workbenches. There's two kinds of 2x4s, green and kiln dried. Always get the kiln dried ones. Look for a KD stamped on the board. They'll be less likely to warp, but still finding straight ones can be a challenge. Just prepare to spend a lot of time rummaging through that stack. But as a woodworker, you'll be using a lot of solid lumber, boards. These are kept further back in the lumber department. In this store, all of the boards are in a single aisle. But one thing I want to point out is just before that aisle are the cheapest boards that you might consider using for certain projects. Furring strips. These are definitely construction grade boards, not intended for woodworking, but I've used them a lot for projects, usually in structural parts of the project where they won't show. These can be super ugly, rough with splits and knots, but if you take the time to sort through them, you can usually find a decent, super affordable board. These are often available in 1x4s, 1x3s, or 1x2s. Oh, and real quick, about sizes. All of the boards, most of the boards in the lumber aisle are 3/4 of an inch thick. They just call them 1x, and whatever the width of a board is called, it's actually narrower, usually a 1/2 inch narrower. So a 1x4 is actually 3/4 of an inch thick by 3.5 inches wide. If you aren't sure and need to measure a board, grab a tape measure from the tool department. You might even find one or two lying around on the floor. At the beginning of this aisle are the pine boards. Sometimes they're called common boards. These are the most affordable, fairly decent boards that you can use for most woodworking projects. These are my go-to boards for so many of my projects. You can usually find some pretty good looking wood here. Like any board though, take the time to look for warped and damaged boards and just pick out the best ones that you can find. So as for pricing, pine boards come in all different widths, several different lengths, and are sold by the board at Home Depot. In other words, the price listed on the card is how much the entire board costs. I usually buy 8-foot long boards. As a weekend woodworker, this is probably the section you're going to spend most of your time and find most of your lumber. At the far end of this aisle is the specialty wood, hardwoods like mahogany, poplar, cherry, maple, oak, walnut, etc. This varies a lot from store to store. This is the nice stuff for making nice furniture and fancy pants projects. These boards are usually in pretty good condition, but they're expensive. So the pricing on hardwood lumber is different from those pine boards. These are sold by the linear foot. So whatever the price is listed on the card, you'll need to multiply that by the length of the board you want. Yeah, these can get expensive real quick. But you can buy only the length that you need. They have a saw for cutting a board to whatever you want, but the saw, at least in this store, rarely seems to work, and finding an employee to use it can be challenging. I usually just try to find a board that's about 8 feet long and go with it. You can also cut it yourself. This store has these carts set up with a really dull handsaw, so you can hack away at a board yourself if you want. Oh, one more bit of advice. Always make sure that any board you want has a barcode on it. If you take something up to the checkout without a barcode, they won't know how much it costs, and they probably won't be able to figure it out without a whole lengthy ordeal. For more help on this topic, be sure to watch my guide for cutting, moving, and hauling plywood by yourself. And if you'd like some help getting started woodworking, there's no better place to begin than my step-by-step approach called The Weekend Woodworker. Join the thousands of people who began with literally no experience and built their first project on their first weekend as a member. Head over to weekendwoodworkercourse.com and get started today. Thanks for watching.